for joining us. We've put together a panel discussion tonight on the topic of affordable medicine, particularly for people on fixed incomes. I'm Joel Baird, the General Manager of Missoula Community Access Television. Thanks for watching. I have on my panel, to my left, on the end, Paul Peterson, who is here from Summit Independent Living Center, Bernie O'Connor from Missoula Aging Services, and on my right, Brian Schweitzer, who's a whitefish farmer and also a candidate for Montana governor. Welcome and thank all of you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having us in.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
I was telling everyone at the beginning of our taping that I'm wholly ignorant on this subject, that I've learned a little, and I'm hoping to learn more through this discussion. I think my ignorance hopefully will make me a pretty good moderator. This is going to be a call-in show. If people are watching the program and would like to call in with anecdotes, observations, questions for the panelists, whatever, feel free. We have slated an hour for the show, but we'll see how it goes. If we run out of things to say, then we'll stop doing it. That's one of the beauties of public access television. It's fairly informal. So if you do want to call in at any point on this topic, feel free. We'll put the number up. I think we neglected to load it in our character generator. The number here is 542-6228. That's 542 MCAT. And so anytime, you might find there's an interruption because we're in the middle of a discussion or something like that. But in any event, feel free to join in. I think, Brian, I'm going to start with you because I feel like you've had a colorful history with this, because I know you've taken senior citizens across the border to Canada to find lower prices there. And maybe that's one way we could start out, that you understand the direness of the problem. And I mean, your solution at least was something that called a lot of attention to the issue. So have at it.
Well, Joel, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with the panel and with you folks in your living rooms this evening. In 1988, Congress passed legislation that made it specifically against the law to re-import medicine into the United States. The suggestion at that time was that in order to protect the medicine supply in America, that we ought not have imported medicines mixed with the medicines that we are producing and selling in the United States. And so since that time, it's been illegal to import medicine from other countries. Well, unfortunately, it's reached an epidemic proportion around the world in that a good part of the medicine is made in the United States. Billions of dollars of research and development grants are made directly to pharmaceutical companies. And of course, the basic research, much of the basic research for medicine, is conducted by state universities and by the National Institute of Health. And yet, after all of the taxpayer dollars are invested in helping to create these wonderful new medicines, these pharmaceutical companies, who have been the beneficiaries of taxpayer dollars, export this medicine all over the world and sell it at half price or even a third. And so, for example, in Canada, where you can buy a monthly dose of Lipitor for half of what you would buy it here, or maybe $50 per monthly dose instead of $100, or many of the other medicines that we're using in Montana are half or even a third. Now, it's interesting because the pharmaceutical companies are receiving these tax benefits, they're receiving the benefit of the research and development, and yet they're able to market this medicine every place else for less than here. We would hear from the pharmaceutical companies that they need to sell medicine at these prices so that they can fund research and development. Well, if they need the money, why don't they sell the same price in Canada as they do in the United States? Seems fair to most people. The pharmaceutical companies would tell us that they're spending $24 billion per year, or about $500 million per new medicine to bring it to market in research and development. But what they don't tell us is that 2/3 of that research and development is actually market development. Not the folks in the lab coats, that's about a third. And so when you're watching all of these television ads in America, you're paying for them because we pay twice as much for our medicine. When you see the benefits that the pharmaceutical salesmen are offering people in the healthcare industry by sponsoring dinners and golf trips, we're paying for it. That is what they call market development. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to force Congress to repeal that act because, frankly, the medicine in Canada is completely safe. In fact, the pharmaceutical companies oftentimes import the basic ingredients from other countries and then manufacture it in the United States, in New Jersey, or even Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States, because they get huge, huge tax breaks for producing this medicine in that enterprise zone of Puerto Rico. So we're only looking for a fair deal. Unfortunately, Congress has received hundreds of millions of dollars of contributions from the pharmaceutical industry, one of the largest contributors in congressional elections, and they continue to look the other way. While many people talk about a prescription drug benefit through Medicare, many of us know in Montana that if we just paid the fair market price that they pay in Canada, that many of us would be able to afford the medicine. It would be half price. So what we would like is a Main Street pharmacist to be able to choose whether they'd like to buy that medicine from a wholesaler in Canada or in fact buy from a wholesaler in the United States. When we took these bus trips to Canada, we had many of the seniors keep track of all the truckloads of grain and cattle and hogs and softwood timber crossing the border, hundreds of truckloads as we were driving north across the border. And yet senior citizens in Montana and everywhere else across America had to physically travel to Canada to buy a 90-day supply of medicine and physically bring it back across the border. It's just wrong to take this business away from our local pharmacists, and it's wrong that our local pharmacists can't buy medicine at the fair world price.
Okay, that is almost an overview. Well, and to be specific, I guess, about the fallout of the high prices, you've talked to people about what they've had to do to cope. I mean, do you have anecdotal examples, I guess, of people on fixed income struggling, to meet, and I don't know. I mean, knock on wood. See, I'm too young and ignorant now to know how much it might even cost a month for someone retired, for instance, needing something like Lipitor, which I understand is a cholesterol control drug. But what are some of the stories you've heard while you were campaigning?
Well, frankly, and we continue to hear them, people from all over America continue to contact me on our website at brianschweitzer.com, where we list over 200 medicines, the price in Canada versus the price in the United States. And we give a how-to guide, how to buy this medicine in Canada. As we took these trips to Canada, these are long trips, 5 hours, 6 hours there and back. And so riding on the bus, we'd sing a lot of songs, and we'd play cards, play games, talk about grandkids and family. But I would spend time and hear the stories of individual senior citizens, and I'll never forget the story. One woman who was riding with us, she started to tell the story about how she'd raised her family, and she'd always played by the rules. She said that she and her husband were married before he went off to World War II, but when the country called, he went off to war, and while he was injured, he did come back, and then she said, we always played by the rules, and she said he worked, and I took care of the family. We had 3 children, and I volunteered at the school, and I was involved in the 4-H club and Boy Scouts, and we paid our taxes, and we paid them on time, and we raised our children in the best way that we could in our community. And then there was some tears, and she talked about how their oldest son was called to go to Vietnam, and he hadn't come home, but they were a family that played by the rules, and when the country called, they responded. And then she talked about how she had lost her husband a few years before, and she's living on a fixed income of $780 a month. And now she's paying over $400 a month just for medicine. And she said, I've always played by the rules, but she said, I've got to stand up. I've got to stand up for myself, and I've got to stand up for other people, and that's why I'm on this bus. I would like to make a difference, not just for myself, but for everyone else who's always played by the rules. And, by the time she finished that story, I had tears running down my eyes, and people around were the same. And the stories that we hear of people who have to decide whether they can take their Celebrex every day of the week. Celebrex, for many of you who are listening, is for rheumatoid arthritis. And when you take the Celebrex, you can get some freedom of movement, and the pain will go away for just a little while. I spoke to one woman who said Celebrex is $110 per monthly dose. And she said, but I can't afford to take it. And so she said, I take it on Mondays because on Mondays, that's the day that I do my shopping. So I'm able to get out and get in my car and get the groceries for the week and make it in and out of the shopping market and make it home with my food. And then she told me a little while later, and she felt a little bit guilty about this, and she said, I take it every other Friday because that's the day the ladies and I get together and play bridge. And if I take Celebrex, I can hold the cards. Celebrex sells for $20 a monthly dose in Mexico and $31 a monthly dose in Canada and over $100 a month in the United States. This is what we're doing to the people of the United States. These are proud people. Most would be more than happy to pay the market price for medicine, the world market price. Many are not even asking to add a prescription benefit to Medicare. And frankly, we buy $100 billion worth of prescription drugs every year in this country. And if we're just going to add a prescription drug benefit through Medicare and shift the gouging from the individuals in Montana and elsewhere around America to the taxpayers of this country, we haven't really accomplished much. Again, before we add a prescription drug benefit to Medicare, we ought to pay a fair world market price.
Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate just a little bit. I don't know if you guys want to, but I mean, it's a different, purpose. But, just to be the moderator, can you think of other examples? I mean, what it sounds like you're suggesting as a solution is price control. Or would it be federally mandated price control? And can you think of a parallel instance, I guess? Maybe milk is one. I don't know. But would you see that as a solution, a federally mandated price control? Or would it be more that, in your vision, the drug companies would decide that they need to alter their marketing strategies and their pricing strategies just to be a good player kind of in the U.S. economy?
Actually, I'm not even suggesting any kind of price controls. Again, we passed the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so if a consumer would like to buy, cheaper grains or cheaper beef or cheaper manufactured goods, and it happens to be cheaper in Canada than the United States, you can import it from Canada. And then markets will find its own level. You will have a single price on both sides of the border. So I'm not talking about price controls. I'm saying that a marketplace would work, but we have to allow the international marketplace to work. When I produce cattle, and I produce timber, and I produce grain, and I sell those in the international market, and I have to compete in the international market. The pharmaceutical companies have used Congress to create an artificial barrier between the Canadian economy and the American economy to allow them to sell this same medicine manufactured in the United States, for half price in Canada, with no concern about that medicine coming back across the border and disrupting the market. So the facts are that I am an advocate of a free market. If free market is good for the globalization advocates who are suggesting for food and for clothing and for bowling balls and for cars, I think it ought to be fair bet that medicine made in the United States should be able to be sold in the United States for the same price that they're selling in Canada.
Okay, so this is where my ignorance is good because it comes into play. I hope I'm matching those of the viewer. And I think you said this in your opening remarks. There is now then a constraint. You can't be in the U.S. and buy pharmaceuticals legally from Canada or Mexico. Is that true?
True. In 1988, when Congress passed the legislation that made it against the law to re-import medicine, they left a specific loophole that allows a person to bring a 90-day supply for their own use, because it's recognized that when people travel internationally, they need to carry those critical medicines with them. So we've allowed them to import for their own use on their body medicine that comes from abroad. There has been in recent years, I guess probably since we started making our runs for the border and taking seniors to Canada, that really shined a spotlight on this problem. There have been some companies in the United States that have created some kind of an alliance with pharmaceutical wholesalers and retailers in Canada, whereby they have a mail order. This is a really gray area. Technically, it is against the law just to mail the medicine across from Canada, and I know that some of the pharmaceutical companies and others are cracking down on this. But it ought not be. If we had representatives that would stand up and fight for the consumers instead of working for the interests of the pharmaceutical companies and their lobbies, we would create a free marketplace. You know, with this $100 billion prescription drug business in the United States, it's not just seniors. If we offer a prescription drug benefit through Medicare, what does that do for someone who's 45 years old or 21 years old that also takes expensive medicine? Nothing. So, frankly, the cost of our insurance would go down, the cost of administering Medicaid would go down, and in fact, if we do offer a prescription drug benefit through Medicare, we could decrease the cost of that program if we just allowed the marketplace to work.
Okay.
Can I
Jump in, please.
Yeah, what Brian says is absolutely correct with the legislature being in session in Helena right now. We're fairly active over there, and probably among the other things being fought over is funding for Medicaid and all of the Department of Public Health and Human Services. And one of the more expensive parts of Medicaid is prescription drugs. Curiously enough, they call it an optional service. Optional because the state can decide whether to provide the prescriptions or not. And if that service were a half to a third as much of an expense as it is right now, I wonder how much of a difference that would make in the budget, along with the ever-present Republican idea of we'll have less taxes and more money. I've never figured that one out, but they say it'll come. But I'm 47, maybe, I don't know, 97 it might happen when I'm 97.
Right. So in your work, Paul, how does that issue come up for clients that you work with?
Well, a lot of the people I work with may have never worked, so their income is lower even on a fixed basis than someone that has worked. Generally speaking, someone on Social Security disability, the one that has Medicare accompanying it, will get a larger monthly check. That's generally speaking. It can be lower, but I think the number right now is about $550 a month for someone that gets Medicaid. There are various ways to arrive at that $550 number, but that's about where it sits. There are other subsidies for housing, some for electricity and so on, but with things as they are now, those subsidies are decreasing. People pay what they call a copay for Medicaid, and they had raised that at one point. It was several $100s higher than it is now. And the outcry caused them to backpedal on that one pretty quick. But when you got $550 to pay a good chunk of your rent, maybe most of it, you're trying to get to and from places. If you're trying to live a life that's more than sitting at home and staying in one room that you've got warm, it gets tough to decide. Like Brian was talking about, people hurt and they stay home when they hurt. They go out when they don't. I'm familiar with the expenses. I have a kidney transplant, and among other things, with having had diabetes for 45 or 47 years. It's expensive to keep me alive, and there are times when I feel not very much wanted by people that truly have the ability to do a better job of providing services I need than they do. Do is a good word, yeah. Sorry. I think one thing to look at is that even if you don't like to, even if you have your hackles up about it, get up and vote. For God's sake, get up and vote. It's one of the few things you can do that will make a difference. I've seen it happen, maybe not as much or as often as you'd like, but get up and vote. Take part in letter writing campaigns. They'll write a letter. Don't sign them to somebody else's because they throw those out. Take time to make an effort and tell the people what you want. One law to change is to not let the money that goes in the campaigns go to the candidate or the representative or senator or whatever upon their retirement. These guys get tens of billions of dollars, maybe not in Montana, but tens of millions of dollars, I'm sorry. And they know that if they don't spend it, it's theirs after some amount of time, even if they do, make millions of dollars on retirement afterwards.
Is that right? You're saying that the campaign money that goes to candidates, do you know about this, Brian, your father?
Yeah, there's been a reformation of that, and I believe that a few numbers of years ago, when a politician retired, they could shift that money for their own personal use. That no longer exists.
Oh, good.
So,
yeah.
and that's, Paul, but you make a very good point, and that is that the special interest money has the ability of changing the minds and the hearts of people who lead us. Frankly, I think that we elect some pretty good people. We send people to Helena. We send people to Washington, D.C., who really believe in what it is that they've said to people. But then they get back to Washington, D.C., or they get to Helena, and the special interests are pulling them one way and pulling them another. And frankly, to get reelected, they need those political action committee dollars. And I think that disrupts the system. It makes good people do things that they ought not be doing. And that's why I'm running for governor, and I am committed not to receive any political action committee. No PAC money. I don't know if it's been done in generations, but the facts are that if we're going to walk the walk, then we will talk the talk later. And frankly, if you receive political action committee from some of these special interests, like the pharmaceutical industry, then people will always be curious about what actions you take as an elected person. So just don't take any PAC money. If you don't take PAC money, then you're able to look people in the eye and look yourself in the mirror and say, we did the right thing.
Okay, there's a challenge for a politician, and I think what Paul had to say about people getting involved in the democratic process is a really good one. I also, in addition to working here at MCAT, which is set up as a public forum for people to come in off the street, learn how to make a television program and express their views, I also cover the city council. And what I notice over time is it's really difficult to get a participatory democracy going. I kind of blame it on a sense of specialization that people have, that if you are concerned about politics, it's because you're a professional concerned about politics person. Like maybe at City Hall we'll see the people that get up and address that body in general become almost specialists in the people that get up and address that body, and almost to a degree over time they become more dismissible because they're the old, the watchdogs, the ones that are always doing it. I think it's real hard for people to realize that they can make a difference collectively and not rely on almost the special interest. Some people become professional citizens, I guess is what I mean to say, and everyone says, well, I don't have to worry about it. The professional citizen will take that role for me, and I think that's really difficult. And even on that note, I want to remind people that this is a call-in show. It's about 7:25. We'll see how much more. We haven't gotten to Bernie yet. We'll see how much longer we go, but the number is 542-6228. If you've heard anything that you'd like to contribute, gainsay, contradict, quarrel with, or chime in, feel free. There's a time to do it.
How about if they just want to cuss at us? That's not acceptable.
Yeah, obscenity will not be tolerated, as the young people have said where they have their call-in shows. But Bernie, I want to give you a chance to talk, and you're representing Missoula Aging Services, and you brought with you some solutions for these problems. I said before we started the show that I thought, Brian would certainly be, in full form to be critical, and he could do that, it's part of what his ambition is about, to make this right. and I don't think you're in that position with Missoula Aging Services, but you are in a position to talk about some services people can look to if they find themselves in a really tight situation with money, trying to afford the drugs and so on.
That's
so
right.
I'm going to give you the floor for a while to talk
Okay.
about that.
And I was going to try desperately to stay away from the political aspect, but I want to piggyback on what Paul said. The people in Washington, D.C. who do make decisions about your future regarding prescription drugs are people who do not pay into the Social Security system or the Medicare system. And when they do retire, they get their full benefits for the remainder of their life. So if they're making $136,000 a year, they're getting that every year for the remainder of their life. Now, if they were actually paying into the Social Security and reliant upon that, maybe their decisions would be a little more empathetic to the common citizen. That's all I'm going to say.
I think it's a very good point, though. I think it
And
is
it's
really
very important to
difficult for
become
people to
political.
imagine what other people are going through. I don't think people can imagine having $600 a month to live on. It is a totally different world for the majority of people that are watching this program anyway,
Absolutely.
or that have cable television subscriptions, for instance. So that part's difficult. But sorry to interrupt.
Well, and that's what we see on a daily basis is the individual, the senior who comes in that is on a fixed income of $600, for instance, and maybe when they were 65, they were doing okay. They were getting the rent paid and the car was maintained, but they face one catastrophic incident in their life medically, and they're in dire straits. So our job as an area agency office, and we're part of a network of area agency offices, not only in Montana, but throughout the United States, that try to identify programs and direct seniors towards these programs that may help them on any of a number of issues, from housing to transportation to nutrition. We are the home of the Meals on Wheels program here in Missoula. And one of the biggest programs that we try to identify for seniors that may help them is prescription drug programs. And we have a low-income medication assistance program ourselves, in which we identify within pharmaceutical companies an assistance program for low-income people, disabled, seniors, and we will help the senior fill out the paperwork. It has to go through their physician or health practitioner, so we'll do the paperwork because we know those physicians are mighty busy and they may feel they may not have the time. So we'll take that step, identify the drug, identify the pharmaceutical company that will possibly provide some assistance, have that paperwork delivered to the physician, and they'll sign off and send it off to the... It's a stopgap measure. It's not something long-term by any means, but it's certainly something that may help. And then we also identify programs that might return finance to the senior. For instance, if they aren't receiving Section 8 or voucher housing, and they are certainly in the financial limitations for that, we'll certainly help them with that. We'll also identify nutrition programs, commodities programs, food stamps, any programs that might put money back in their pocket that might help them inevitably pay for the prescription drugs that they need.
Yeah, it's a real clearinghouse that way. I mean, the services of Missoula Aging Services are kind of like a total life solution. I mean, as far as, finances and these
We'd like to
basic
think of it
things.
as holistic.
Yeah, that's right. Now hold the thought, because we actually do have
Sure.
a caller. So I want to do this right, too. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, well, feel free to make a comment.
Well, I do have a couple of comments about the prescription drugs. That I do have another question, and I don't know if this is really, the time or the place to bring it up. I'm very, very concerned about these recent cuts for dentistry, podiatry, no eyeglasses, no, I just had 2 hip replacements. No artificial limbs or body parts of any sort, effective February the 1st till June the 30th. And what I found out is they put in, a bid to cut the program, but they didn't put a bid in to restart it after June the 30th. And I went to the dentist last week, and he refused to give me any services.
No, I'm sorry, because I don't know what program you're referring to
Well, I have
that suffered
Medicaid
the
and
cuts.
Medicare.
So you're referring to those?
Yes, and so I'm on Social Security, and the thing is that the food stamps were cut quite a long time ago, and I get $20 a month. My income is very low. I just had these 2 hip replacements, and when they cut my dental, it's for everybody. They just sent us a quick one-paper, very, very quiet about it. They were in Helena and said that no reason, just the budget is in the red, and these services, would be taken away. And sort of what's going around is if we take these services away and people don't stand up and they're getting really beat down with all this, taking away all these services, and it's really getting frightening. The next step will be to take away, she said it's either the dental, eyeglasses, podiatry, artificial parts, limbs, arms, hips, and I just had the hips put in of any sort, or the drugs.
Yeah.
And for people that do get them. And so, and you're talking about people that don't, and I get Medicare as well. But this was the Medicaid program. But I haven't had anybody to talk to about it. I called the helpline, and they just patronize you, hem-haw, and say, well, it's just a temporary cut, but they probably will enact it to a law. That's very scary. It's really abandonment. It's abusive. I used to work for the government myself. I didn't know that I did not have hips and so on and so forth. And so that was a big, huge change in my life. And that kind of attitude, I am writing letters, and I believe this gentleman said to be sure to sign your name. And you do get beat down. You start to feel beat down in this state. I've been through a lot of things, but now things, I wish I could go back to work because this is so abusive, the way they're treating people. And, you can't have dental services. Oh, really? Well, what if I get an infection in my mouth and it goes to my hips? Are you going to take out my hips that I just had put in?
Sounds like you're keeping a sense of humor, though.
Well, I am, but it does kind of make you panicky.
Sure.
And if you don't be careful, and it's hard, because it seems like fight,
Well, now, Cora, are you aware of Missoula Aging Services?
Oh, yes,
Mr.
I have
O'Connor
problems
is
when I
here.
was getting having all these surgeries, and went to the hospital, came home and took care of myself. I get the Meals on Wheels, but I've called and asked them, and I asked, this one lady called me one time and said, well, there are some things that they help out with, per se, the food stamps being only $20, where they used to be $65, which is, it only gets $525 a month, and that's all forgotten. The legislature has forgot all about the food stamps. They fight and argue over everything, and they're on to all these other areas. It's just cut, where we can't even eat, we can't even live.
Oh. And now, did you have a question for any of us?
Let me jump
Or
in.
Brian's going to jump in.
Yeah, okay.
What's really perverse about health care in the United States is that you can be covered by Medicare when you reach your senior years, but it will limit the kind of care that you will get. As you've described, no dental care, and unless, of course, you have acute dental care. If you do have an infection of some kind, you can go to the emergency room and then Medicare will cover it.
Right,
But
and
we
then
don't
that's going to double their cost.
quadruple it 10 times. And many, many people know that if they need health maintenance, they pay for that themselves. But if they have crisis intervention, that is something that Medicare takes care of. And so you see, we have spent our money unwisely in health care. We ought to take care of our population. And frankly, for many of the listeners, you should recognize that Medicare doesn't cover prescription drugs. It doesn't cover dental care. And Medicaid picks up where Medicare is not reaching folks for low income. Right. It's both.
And, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you because I know you're trying to help me, and I thank you for that. But I do take good care of my teeth. I brush and floss. I do, but having these surgeries and having these medicines and things, it's hard on your body. It really is. That's why just because services aren't provided, for a lot of other people, I really think that we're not on Social Security for nothing. It's not a welfare program. It took a long time to get on it. And I think the reason that dental care is important is because we have these medicines. I take really good care of my teeth. But, as my doctor told me, that the medicines that I do take personally, it does affect my teeth and my health. And this is just, I don't smoke and so on and so forth. And I'm getting into a healing mode. And then what about no eyeglasses and no podiatry? And when you think about it, they haven't enacted it to a law, but it is. I was at the chiropractor today, and she said, well, that's abandonment. It's abusive because, we need these services, and there's other services they could cut instead of taking away from the poor people.
Yeah.
We barely got any as it was. Any half-sensible person's going to brush and floss their teeth.
Well,
Everybody that's on Social Security, not that you're saying that, isn't a loser. And that's sort of how you feel. But I can get past all that, because I'm a survivor. But I want my dental, I want the eyeglasses. I feel that it's important. I take care of myself, and I think that they should find another part of that particular budget in the Medicaid program to cut instead of taking it all away for 5 months, which means people are going to go to the emergency room, which means it's going to be a bigger cost for them. We're not going to just let our teeth rot and give up. I'm surely not going to do it.
Well, caller, thank you. I want to give Bernie a little time to describe the Missoula Aging Services, but thanks so much for calling in.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And
Great
if
points.
you know of a place, or I'm writing letters, or somebody that will stand with me. If I have to stand alone, I will. But, I'm writing representatives, right now. And I hope that I don't get the idea I give up, well, my letter isn't going to work, because I'm sure going to give it a big try.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for calling.
Well, thanks
Thank
for
you.
listening to me.
Sure,
and trying
sure.
to help me out. I'm sure you understand.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, see, that's something.
Well, this
Yeah.
caller makes a very important point that programs that are being cut currently that take care of what would be determined as small things by the legislature or by Helena may potentially turn into a large problem. And that's our concern at Missoula Aging Services, is when someone loses a very basic, essential service, that how does it impact them, and what inevitably will be the cost to the taxpayer. If a person loses the ability to remain independent, and our job is to try to keep seniors living independently as long as possible with some quality of life, if they lose those essential services that supports that independent setting, if they end up in a nursing home, we're going to be paying top dollar for their care at that point.
Yeah. You mean that the attempts to kind of restrict the outlay for social service ends up snapping back much more. No, I guess the caller, and you have to forgive my ignorance, the caller was describing a situation in which Medicaid was cut, like she was told that for 5 months these particular ailments are not going to be addressed. Is that right? And this is going to be a cost-cutting measure. We'll just have a moratorium on this stuff for 5 months, and then we'll see what we can do to restore some of the service. Now, she's saying if something goes wrong in that time period, or the solution you offered to go to the emergency room would cost much, much more than not having withdrawn the service to begin with, or potentially. Anyway.
Here's the problem, and for the viewers that are listening that have private insurance, understand this issue of cost shifting. In Montana, about half of the people who live in Montana have a federal program through the Veterans Administration or Medicare or Indian Health Services. So 50% of our population is taken care of by some kind of federal program. So now we have, let's look at the other 50% of Montana. Almost half, 23%, 22.5% don't have health insurance of any kind. So it means that around a quarter of Montana has full health insurance. When we have Medicare reimbursements, and the health care professionals will know this at home, we reimburse the healthcare professionals, the hospitals, the clinics, the doctors, at about 55 or 60%. And when we have Medicaid reimbursements, these are for low-income folks, it reimburses at 50% or less. The clinics, the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, they have to stay in business. So they shift the expenses to those who have insurance. So if you have a private insurance program, you are actually paying for the health care of the other 75%. So the Medicaid program in Montana is matched 3-to-1 with federal dollars. Every dollar that the Montana legislature pledges towards Medicaid for low-income folks, there will be $3 come from the federal government. And you see, if you have private insurance, it will lower the cost of your private insurance for every dollar that we attract from the federal government. And so it's good business. It is good business to spend money on Medicaid to get the 3-to-1 matching funds. Because if we don't, these folks will get health care. They will go to the emergency room. They will go to the doctor. They will go to the nurse. The health care professionals in Montana won't refuse them the service, but they have to stay in business. So they will shift that cost to the 25% of the people in Montana who have private insurance. So you see, if you have an opportunity to contact your legislator, tell them, this is good business. Let's take care of Medicaid. Let's attract those 3-to-1 funds. We have a CHIP program, something called the Child Health Insurance Program, that takes care of low-income children so that their health care needs are met through insurance. That's matched 5-to-1. So the Medicaid program, the CHIP program, these are great places for Montana to attract federal matching funds. And I think that when the legislature is looking at places to cut, they ought to look at places that don't attract federal dollars at a 3 to 5-to-1. And for those of you who are on private insurance, you have a dog in this hunt because your insurance rates go up. Who out there hasn't had their private health insurance increase by as much as 50% during the last 4 years? Part of it's the shifting of health care dollars.
Oh, and Bernie, I wanted to give you time. I know you brought some material, on the affordable drug issue. Or did I play you out already? I don't want to put you on the spot. I think you've got more stuff.
Yeah,
I
I just wanted to talk, besides the low-income medication assistance programs that we help seniors with, there is a website called Benefits Checkup, and the site is actually www.benefitscheckup.org. And this is a program that was set up by the National Council on Aging. And when you go to the web page, you'll see 2 buttons. One of them merely reads Benefits Checkup, and that's a direction in which if you were looking for health or finance or any kind of programs that you would need help with those subjects, you would take that route. But if you're looking specifically for prescription drug information, there's a second button that is Benefits Checkup RX, or prescription. And they ask very simple questions. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. They don't ask your name or your social security number or your address, any of that personal information. They'll be asking primarily what your income is, what your household income is, what are your assets, and what kind of drugs, what are the name of the drugs that you're using. And at the end of that whole process, they'll give you some idea of what programs might be able to assist you. It's a great way to plug into programs that exist, and it's very fast. If you don't have access to a computer, we do have a computer room for seniors at Missoula Aging Services. If you haven't operated a computer before, we have volunteers that will actually tutor you in the use of those computers. So there is access to this website through Missoula Aging, or at home if you have a personal computer.
Wanted to return to the Medicaid issue for just a minute. There's an organization called Families USA that has an interesting feature on their website. It's www.familiesusa. I forget what they call it on there. It's What it does is you can click on a list of states. All the states are there, and what they do is look at the exact issue that Brian had brought up about the money that Medicaid brings into Montana, and it looks at issues like how many times does that money turn over before it leaves the state and so on. And I believe there is one part where they talk about how they do their calculations. I think it's called the Medicaid calculator now. Now that I think of it, and you can put in the dollar amount that you want to do a what if with. What if we lose $50 million in Medicaid matching funds from the feds, and it'll tell you how much you'll lose in job related, how many jobs that means, how much money in various places that means, and it's really surprising. If their numbers are on, I've never heard anybody accuse Families USA of being full of hot air. It's amazing the amount of money that gets lost. If you're talking, just think about it for a minute. Any 3 to 1 and 5 to 1, let's average it at 4 to 1. If you lose $50 million of money from the general fund, that's what the state spends. If you're going 4 to 1, that's $200 million. That's out of the state's economy. It's gone.
Because this money is matched by the federal government.
By the
Yes.
federal government. Paul's onto something here. I'm a farmer, and I'm a third-generation farmer and rancher. And we've always considered agriculture as the largest industry in Montana. But I have something to reveal to you tonight. Agriculture is now a $1.9 billion part of Montana's economy, and health care is $2.3 billion. Paul, the health care field is the largest part of Montana's economy. It's larger than agriculture today. And when we turn these federal dollars away, we are decreasing economic opportunities in Montana. So we're just talking about dollars here. It's more than just taking care of people and families. It's actually good business to bring this money in. I'd like to focus a little bit about the solutions that have been suggested in the Montana legislature. One of them, which has been brought by a great senator from Trout Creek by the name of Jim Elliott, would mirror the attempts that have been made in Maine. In Maine and some other states, they have decided that, well, gee, if the Veterans Administration and some of the large insurance companies can negotiate directly with these pharmaceutical companies for lower priced medicines, why can't a state? Or in fact, why couldn't 2 or 3 or 4 states band together with a few million subscribers and say, we'd like to buy the medicine for the same price as the Veterans Administration buys it. We'd like to buy it at the same price as they pay in Canada, for example, and to begin the dialogue of negotiating a price for the medicine that comes into Maine. We can do that in Montana. We could stand alone in Montana, or we could band together with the Dakotas and maybe Wyoming or Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and we could negotiate a price for these medicines. That's a great solution. It's being worked on in Maine and other states, and Jim Elliott would like to bring it to Montana. There's some other notions out there that we should take money out of the tobacco settlement and take it away from other health care needs and use it to buy this medicine at full price from the pharmaceutical companies, not at the fair world price or the price that the insurance companies pay. And I think that this is not only taking money away from critical needs of tobacco victims, but it's also a subsidy for the pharmaceutical companies, and it's wrong-headed.
Well, Brian, are you suggesting in this plan, like the one proposed for Maine, if the state banded together, I mean, I remember, I guess there are still state liquor stores, so are you suggesting it would be state drugstores?
No, not really. The way it would work is the Main Street pharmacist would be able to buy through the state of Montana wholesaler. A Main Street pharmacist could still buy from their traditional wholesaler, whether that be Merck or Pfizer or a wholesale house in Denver or Salt Lake. But if the state of Montana negotiated in a pool, then they would also have the option of buying it through the state of Montana. So we would just like our Main Street pharmacists to be part of this solution. They are a critical part of this web of healthcare. So many people get great advice from their physician, but it's their pharmacist who is the last line of defense. When we took people to Canada, we would first organize 40 or 50 people who would ride the buses. Then we would ask them to send us a copy of the prescriptions that they're taking, and we would fax them to the pharmacy in Canada to make sure that they would have the medicine on hand when we arrived, and then ask them for the prices to make sure that it was much cheaper. And do you know that in about 15 or 20% of the cases, the pharmacist couldn't read the doctor's writing? And every Main Street pharmacist knows this, and when they know their patient and they read this prescription and it appears as though it's for a pregnant woman and it's an 81-year-old man, they're the last line of defense. They say, "Frank, I don't think you need this medicine today." But the notion that Congress has that they're going to create some kind of a big insurance program and move people out of Medicare to a private insurance program, and that Merck and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, the other pharmaceutical companies, will set up out-of-state wholesale houses, and that you will now have a prescription card and your medicine will be mailed to you from out of state. Two things happen. Number one, that last line of defense that we have with Main Street pharmacists in Montana is lost. And the second is we're putting Main Street businesses out of business. And as Paul had suggested, healthcare is a big part of Montana's economy. So it's good business to take care of our folks, and it's good business to negotiate a fair price for this medicine.
Not only that, but the mail-order pharmacies will, at their whim, sometimes change your prescription, too. One woman in our office has, formerly in our office, had some allergies to particular prescriptions, and she sent in her order, and it was not on the company's formulary, their list of approved drugs, and they sent her another one. Well, she tried it, and it turned out she was allergic to that one, so they tried another one, allergic to that one. Caused her to miss work because someone that didn't know her, had never seen her, was deciding what she had to take.
Yeah, that does seem a little scary, that idea, the mail order. I remember my mom telling me that when she grew up, doctors were kind of expensive, but people didn't go to the doctor. They went to the pharmacist for most of the common ailments. It would be the pharmacist that would set the bones or deal with infections or any number of things that we think of today as like, emergency room or walk-in clinic type activity. A pharmacist did. That seemed kind of fascinating too.
Paul brings up a good point about that switch, and that's the whole idea of fraud and scam, which is something that's an epidemic among the senior population. When people get into desperate situations and they're looking for a good deal regarding the prescription drugs or something, they're really candidates to be ripped off. And recently AARP carried out a poll in Montana and had 1,200 people respond to it. And on the question of have you ever been a victim of fraud or a scam, 48% said they had, and the vast majority of those people said it had to do with prescription drugs. So I want to warn listeners and viewers out there that there are people that will see you as a susceptible victim and will take advantage of you, and certainly I would request that if you have any feeling that somebody might be defrauding you, certainly give us a call and we'll follow up.
Okay, I guess we have a call. We'll take it. Hello, caller.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hi.
I've been listening to your conversation, and a while ago you were talking about going into Canada actually to buy drugs. Didn't one of the, I'm confused, didn't one of the big drug companies say that they will no longer sell to the Canadian companies that do business with Americans? Is that true?
Yes, in fact, Glaxo Wellcome, the big pharmaceutical wholesaler out of Manitoba, I think they call it CanadaPharmacy.com or something like that, they had been contacted by Glaxo Wellcome and said, we will no longer sell our medicine to you if you continue selling this medicine in the United States. as I suggested earlier, it is still technically illegal to send the medicine across the
Can we still
border.
go to Canada?
Yes, you can. We can still, the loophole still exists that you can bring a 90-day supply across on your own person. You first have to go to a Canadian doctor and have them write a prescription for you, and then you go to the Canadian pharmacy and they will fill a 90-day supply. When you cross the border coming back from Canada, you need to carry with you your American doctor's prescription, and they will compare that prescription with the medicine that you've brought back to make sure that you have only a 90-day supply and it's the medicine that you actually require. These pharmaceutical companies...
You mentioned just one drug company. Is this going to be a trend, do you think? Is this going to happen with other drug companies? And how do we know which ones we can get in Canada?
Well, one of the ways you can find that out is if you go to my website, brianschweitzer.com, I have a place where you can click on how much would you save. And I have a list of over 200 medicines that give you a price retail in Canada versus retail in the United States. And I give you phone numbers of some pharmacies in Canada, so you would be able to call ahead before you went. But you see, when we started taking busloads of people across the border a few years ago, these small pharmacies along the border in Canada would get a great deal of heat from Health Canada through the pharmaceutical companies, and sometimes we would get a phone call after we would take just one busload to a small pharmacist, and he'd say, Brian, I'd like to continue helping the seniors from Montana, but they have come down on me like a ton of bricks. The power of these pharmaceutical companies is international.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the solutions are to force Congress to take this border control, allow us to re-import medicine so that your pharmacist on Main Street can buy the medicine from a wholesaler in Canada. And the second notion is right here in Montana, let's us, the Montana people, negotiate with these pharmaceutical companies and demand that they allow our local pharmacists to buy that medicine at a fair world price.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for calling.
Yeah, thank you for the call. Well, jeepers, in all fairness, though, I remember, Bernie, did you actually have a list of free pharmaceuticals from drug companies? Was that something you had in your packet? I imagine
are
that.
actually assistance programs within
Okay.
pharmaceutical companies. It's something that's not really well publicized, and they're targeting low-income people. This is seniors and disabled. And they make it, I shouldn't say they make it. It can be difficult to fill out all the paperwork and hook it up with your physician. It requires a health practitioner. So we will assist people with that. We'll determine what pharmaceutical company provides the drug that this person is on, and then we will complete the paperwork that needs to be completed for that, give it to them to be given to their physician. All he needs or she needs to do is sign off on it and mail it into the...
And this is an opportunity to buy a necessary maintenance prescription at a discount.
It could be a discount.
From
It could be giving it to them for free. It could be a limited amount of time. All the assistance programs are set up differently within
Yeah.
each pharmaceutical company.
And could you neutrally describe them as generous, comprehensive, anything like that?
We've had fairly good luck with them.
Okay.
We haven't had a lot of people pursue it because, for whatever reason, maybe it is a drug company that only provides 30 days worth of drugs, and they're on something for a long period of time.
I would echo what,
Oh,
I'd echo everything that you just said. I do that at Summit too for folks. Summit serves people with disabilities of any age, or the only requirement we have is that the person has a disability. I know a lot of people think that when you reach a certain number of years that if all of a sudden your hips go out that's not a disability, but it doesn't really matter how old you are. If your hips are gone, then it's a disability the way I see it. Or if you can't see, or if you can't pee, or whatever it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dwayne is telling us we have just a moment to wrap it up. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Paul Peterson from Summit Independent Living Center, Bernie O'Connor from Missoula Aging Services, Brian Schweitzer, Whitefish farmer, candidate for Montana governor, and you for watching and for calling in. Thanks for watching this program on affordable medicine. I'm Joel Baird for MCAT. Good night.